just keeps on coming. 1, 2, 3, now our 4th expansion for Marvel Champions. Is it worth it even after all this time? Let's find out. Hi everybody, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and as always, if you like what you see, please remember to like the video, consider subscribing, and just comment about the product in question or anything else that you want to feedback me on. And of course, don't forget to check out the Patreon campaign that's always running that helps to support the channel in funding all the subscriptions it has to do, as well as providing it with review copies. Take care, and love you all. So, Fantasy Flight. Keeping up with what Fantasy Flight like to do, with the exception of Star Wars Outer Rim, they like to pump out expansions for everything that's selling well, and Marvel Champions is no exception. This is now the 4th big bucks that we got for this. I mean, we have had Galaxy's Most Wanted, we have had The Rise of Red Skull, we have had Mad Titan Shadow, you know, and that's not even including all the little packs that you got. This game's got a lot of content now. Remember when it used to be just the base box and nothing else, and it was just like, oh, you know, nice little bit, you know, nice little game, this is cool, this has probably got legs. Well, going pretty strong. It's a top one for a lot of people, and for me it's probably my 3rd favourite LCG out of the range, although it is fighting for Lord of the Rings LCG, so maybe it could be bumped up to 2nd, but I still find Arkham Horror LCG to be my favourite. But this is still like a 10 out of 10, at worst a 9 out of 10 LCG for me. I love it, I enjoy playing it, I'm a big Marvel fan, so being able to control my favourite heroes is always a thing. So Sinister Motives is very much in the same vein as these other big box expansions as I was just explaining. It's a big box, it has a campaign mode, it comes with 2 heroes, it has a bunch more like cards that you can throw into different other games like the scenario cards, you know, like the basic scenario cards, but also 5 villains that you can fight against that can be done standalone or as part of the campaign mode. Now honestly, campaign is actually I don't like playing it in campaign mode as much, because the story, none of these games ever really had much of a story, and this is no exception. It's Sinister Motives, which makes you think, oh, Sinister 5 is going to play a huge part in this.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards. I'm sorry, I can't.
They play a part, but it's a little bit of a bait and switch. Now, suffice to say, there's going to be some spoilers here, okay? But let's face it, Fantasy Flight have put out enough stuff about this game. People are talking about it. If you're really that worried about spoilers, then by all means, check the end of the video for a verdict, but otherwise, just stick with me. The story in this is whatever. It's mainly following the 2 main heroes that you've got, which is Miles Morales Spider-Man and Ghost Spider, who basically is Gwen Stacy. So think the Into the Spider-Verse, you know, that really amazing animated movie that really needs to get more buzz, and it's getting a sequel. Thank God it's getting a sequel. But yeah, those 2 characters that you love in that show, well, now you can get to play them as characters, and it just basically is them 2 going up against the new threat, which is the sort of Norman Osborn is doing some weird stuff with the Venom symbiote, and so you go to have a look at Oscorp, and you have to fight a fair few of like some famous villains, a few of the Sinister Six at one point, and eventually deal with the big threat, which in this case is Venom Goblin. Yes, you already have Venom as a separate villain, but now you also get Venom Goblin. I love the word Venom. There's something about that word. Yeah, when you hear it, I mean, as much as that movie kind of sucked, I do love it when he just says at the end, "We are Venom."
We are Venom.
It's just such a cool... I love that voice. The rest of the films are mostly rubbish, but that voice actor they get for Venom, it just sounds so good. And it's one of my favourite Spider-Man villains. But with this one, who cares about the story? The campaign is like, whatever. Nobody cares about the story in this. It's not really a gripping narrative. It's just a way to play the game so that there are slight tweaks to the setup and your deck and that as you go through. The campaign in this one feels very more tacked on though compared to a lot of the other boxes. The other boxes do some major things in terms of a campaign. This one doesn't really do a lot. You essentially have a couple of cards that are constantly in play every single scenario. Public Outcry, which is essentially a random card in the middle of here. I'm not going to find the specific card, but it's one of the basic cards that you get. And it basically just means that the acceleration of the threat is higher in every game unless you can get rid of it. But when you're going through the scenarios, it's like public outcry doesn't make any sense. I mean, Venom Goblin is going around and doing stuff to the entire city. Are we really bothered about whether some people think that Spider-Man is a menace at this point?
He's a criminal, that's who he is. A vigilante, a public menace.
There are bigger things to worry about here. So the fact that that keeps coming in every scenario is just more of a pain. It's annoying to have to deal with. But on top of that, that's kind of the only major thing in the campaign apart from a reputation track. Depending on how well you do in each scenario, you get a number of reputation points and you move down this track and you get some benefits the more reputation you have, but there's also more negatives to balance it out because the villains are kind of getting a little bit like, you know, we need to consider you a bigger threat. So it basically just evens out, and honestly, I will say the benefits you get outweigh what the villains get up to a point. If you get to really high reps, which I swear is damn near impossible to do, you can end up giving the villain a bit of a leg up, really. But just getting about halfway down the track will get you, a couple of extra benefits that are pretty decent, like a piece of shield tech, which is essentially an item that you can pick in the game to start with. It's like a permanent setup card. Trying to find specifically, here we go, a bunch of shield tech, and you can choose one of these, and they're double-sided for some reason, but essentially you can pick from one of these and you get it. So for example, dart gun, you can shoot darts that ping for damage when you attack. You can get more hit points, you can get increases to decreases to certain stats, you can get readying effects. The one I used was every time you attack a villain, you discard a card off the top of the deck, and if there's no boost icons on it, they're stunned. That turned out to be a bit of a waste of time. I don't recommend you take that, for reasons we'll get onto later. Honestly, best one I can think of that you can take is probably the one that allows you to take less damage. That's a really good one. I think the propulsion gauntlet, the one that allows you to take 2 indirect damage and ready your hero, in some cases, particularly with Gwen Stacy, is outright bonkers. So for 2 damage, if you're not getting hit that much, it's really good to ready your hero. Failing that, I quite like the laser goggles. Laser goggles, you get -1 thought, but you get +1 attack, and your hero's basic attacks get overkill. Honestly, one of the best things I find in Marvel Champions is just to kill the villain as quickly as possible rather than let the game delay too long, so anything that allows you to do that pretty quickly is pretty good going.
First of all, that's horrible.
That sort of stuff is quite cool, and that's what the campaign allows you to do, but other than that, honestly, I'd rather just play these in standalone mode. I think the campaign here is pretty weak, I think, even compared to the others, which weren't exactly great campaigns, but this one just feels pretty minor. Now, in terms of the content of the cards, though, that's a different story. So we have got Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy. Both of these are pretty solid heroes once you start tweaking them. The starter decks in this are better, I will admit, than a lot of the starter decks we've had before, which have been complete garbage. But these still aren't exactly great. And yes, you might go up against Sandman, the first villain, and go, oh, the starter decks did okay, I was able to beat him. Have fun going up against Venom, who comes next with these starter decks. Yeah, tell me that was an easy fight. Or especially if you get to the end, Venom Goblin, yeah, have fun with him on a starter deck. It's not going to happen. So don't think that you're going to cruise through the campaign with a starter deck. It really isn't going to happen. You really ought to just take the hero and create your own deck, really. Have a play around with them, see what they're like, and build a deck. It will be more rewarding to you, I think, in the long run. But both of these are pretty solid heroes. Gwen Stacy is all about readying, so her alter ego is a bit naff. She has a card called Ticket to the Multiverse that's a double resource card. The effect it does is pretty rubbish, but just having a double resource card at your beck and call is pretty cool. But you can, as an alter ego, shuffle it back into your deck. So this is a double resource that could come out multiple times. That's pretty cool. Mainly, though, you will keep her in Ghost Spider form and just never switch her back, though, because she's already pretty good stat-wise. 1 fort, 2 attack, 3 defense. 3 defense, yes, sign me up, because I tend to like playing protection decks. But every time you resolve and interrupt a response on an event, you ready her once per phase. So her events that are key to her, and ones that you design for her deck, have interrupt and response on so that you can keep readying her. You can defend from an enemy attack, and then when you've done that, you play a card that causes her to ready, so she's ready to attack in the next round. But then you could have something that you attack, you play a card, it readies her, you attack again. So you're doing a lot of like multi-attacks and defending across rounds, and honestly, being able to do that as a hero is actually pretty like strong in this game, full stop. But, you know, she's a pretty solid character. You build her right, get the right stuff. Protection and aggression, easily her two favorite aspects, I think. I don't see her working with justice, to be honest. And I don't really... Well, you could make a leadership deck out of her with all the Spider-Man allies, but frankly, you're going to put a bunch of Spider-Man allies in there anyway, and I'm not a big fan of the leadership aspect anymore. Allies are just too expensive to get out, and they don't stick around long enough, so I don't find them to be a very viable way of playing the game. But, you know, she could try a leadership one with that, but honestly, I think you're probably better off with protection or aggression. Like, just go outright kill the enemy fast, or do protection and make yourself practically untouchable while whittling them down over time. So, yeah, Ghost Spider is pretty sweet, and definitely I think my favourite of the two. Miles Morales is strong, but again requires a good deck around him. Basically, he's got... His alter ego just allows him to shuffle a card back into the deck. Okay, cool, whatever. You don't tend to notice that much. But Spider-Man, his 2/2/2 stat line, allows him, it gives him two abilities, Venom Blast and Spider Camouflage, both of which do various things like give him toughness or do damage, but mainly one stuns and one confuses. This guy is very good at dishing out the stuns and confuses, you know, those status effects, which are just great to have on the villain, particularly stunned. My favourite thing to do with the villain is stun lock them so that they can't attack me back while I'm pummeling them. So satisfying. And most of his cards are based on the fact that when he gets to do stuff, you know, he does some various damage, particularly more so if they're already stunned and confused, but then some of them will say resolve your special ability of Spider Camouflage, and then that confuses the enemy, happy days. So you really got to basically be chucking around the status effects like crazy. Again, the starter deck's not very good with him, because the starter deck just basically gives you a bunch of shield justice cards that are all about, like, removing thwart. But they don't help him with regards to his main abilities, so it's not really working out. I didn't like his starter deck much at all, even though the prospect of a Justice Shield deck did sound pretty sweet. I wonder if anybody's made a deck for that. But yeah, definitely build a deck around him. Aggression would be a good one with him. I don't really see him doing leadership. I don't really see him doing protection much either. But Justice definitely, I think, would work well with him, and I think Aggression would work quite well with him as well, you know, to really just keep pumping out those status effects. Now, he's a little bit lackluster in this campaign, though, mainly because of two of the villains, and we'll get onto those now. 5 villains. So, we've got Sandman. Sandman, he's an okay villain. He basically he piles up counters on a card, which allows him to basically destroy his own encounter deck. Now, granted, he was doing that in my first game, and I thought, so what? Okay, chew for your own encounter deck. Eventually this is going to mean something. Whatever, yeah, I'll keep hitting you. Yeah, fine, pile them on, I don't care. Surge all your sands, yeah, fine. Then the encounter deck ran out a lot quicker than it usually does. And I thought, I'm missing something here. Let me just have a look at the rulebook. What happens when you encounter... Oh! It was a revelation, because, I mean, I can't remember all the rules in the game, but yeah, it adds acceleration tokens. It's like... Now I get it! It's like, now I get it! Yeah, so he basically churns through his encounter deck, makes it run out so that acceleration tokens keep piling up so that you can't keep up with the scheme. Okay, cool. He's not particularly tricky though, although he can hit like a ton of bricks in his second level form, and certainly his minions, particularly his sand clone, is pretty nasty. I mean, X attack, where X is number of tokens on City Street. Yeah, if you let that get out of hand, it could really screw you over. But my only problem with Sandman is, I mean, he's not too difficult to beat, but he's a bit drawn out. I don't find that you can take him out particularly quickly, because you've got to keep an eye on certain other things, and the minions will pop out every now and again. So, I don't know, he feels like a longer fight. But he's fine. He's just probably the least memorable out of this set. And then you got Venom. But Venom, I didn't expect him to come up second in the lineup. You know, he comes up pretty quick. This guy's tough. Oh boy, yes. Not the toughest one in the... Well, actually, I don't know. He could be the toughest in this expansion. He's definitely up there with the Venom Goblin. But Venom is just an absolute blitzer. This is a brawler. This guy is relentlessly beating you down. He's got ways to give himself boost cards like crazy. And every time you hit him and damage him, you have to put a face down boost card on your identity. So every time you damage him, you're getting more boost cards, which means that when he hits you back, he hits like a ton of bricks. Ow! If I wasn't playing Ghost Spider, I think I would have struggled with this guy. And it brought me to the keyword that I hate the most on any villain. It's a new one called Steady. Steady means that you have to have 2 stuns or 2 confuses on an enemy before it affects them. and then they both go away. I hate that keyword. It really got on my nerves, the fact that I couldn't stun this guy very easily. And so he's constantly coming at you with really hard attacks, particularly if he gets some of his attachments out. But he's a cool villain to fight because you've got a bell tower card on the side, which has you essentially like trying to ring the bell to weaken him and do more damage. But he's got a lot of ways to turn it back off again. But it's a very thematic way to do a scenario. And I thought, you know, this was a really good immersive scenario to play. And yes, he's tough as nails, but I'd rather play him than Grey Goblin anytime. And yeah, I thought he was pretty solid. Then you've got Mysterio. Mysterio is very different compared to a lot of other ones. He's very much about doing mirages and playing with your mind and so on and so forth. So you don't tend to get attacked very much for a lot of damage in this. But this guy will pump out encounter cards on you if you're not careful. And of course, he has a pretty tight scheme to deal with. And he will scheme as much as he possibly can. So yeah, you've got to take this guy out quick, because he can get out of control very quickly if you're not careful. So what did I do? I kicked his butt within about a few turns or something. It's like, yeah, he doesn't have a lot of defenses. So if you do go down the route of just pummeling him so quick before he gets a chance to do anything, you'll take him out relatively easily. So yeah, he wasn't too difficult for my particular deck, but I could see him being a problem if your deck doesn't get up to speed particularly quickly. I'd love to see what War Machine does against him. It's just like, I will play with your mind. Whatever. It's like, he would just blitz him. Then you have got my favourite scenario out of the entire box, the Sinister Six. Yeah, you think the Sinister Six are going to feature quite a lot in this game? They're in it for one scenario. Bait and switch? I don't know. But it is definitely worth the scenario, because essentially you fight a bunch of mini villains. So they've all got like about 8 to 10 hit points or so. But it's Kraven, it's Hobgoblin, Vulture, Scorpion, Electro, Dark Octopus. So I love Dark Octopus in movie and cartoon form. He's just one of my favourite villains, but particularly in the Spider-Man lore. But with this one, you fight a couple of them at a time, but then when you take one out, there's a chance that one might ambush you and come back out. So it's variable as to who you get. They've got different scheme and attack values. They've got different responses, which happens when they damage you. So you're trying not to take damage from these guys, which for Ghost Spider is not a problem, but for other decks could be troublesome. And so they keep switching in and out. They get some pretty nasty attachments if you're not careful, and if that happens, game over. But while you're dealing with all these like little villains coming out, you've got to thwart this massive scheme to escape from the scenario. It's a really cool scenario, very thematic. It gave me such nostalgic feels for my love of the old Spider-Man cartoon and seeing the Sinister Six in there. It's pretty well balanced in terms of difficulty. I found it not too difficult, but also not too easy either, that you can't autopilot this one. This one I'd like to play more often. Honestly, really enjoy this scenario. This is my favourite easily. And then you got Venom Goblin. I thought I was going to have to play this 10 times in order to beat it, because the problem with all these box sets is that they basically say, right, you're going to, you know, have some cool scenarios, and then your final one is going to be stupidly hard and overpowered. He can get overpowered if certain cards come out. I actually beat him first time without too much difficulty as my Ghost Spider deck. But I think my Ghost Spider deck is tailored to beat this guy, because being able to suck up his damage is quite handy, and you can basically just stay and he never schemes. And I got a lot of defensive cards out that said that when I take no damage, I remove threat. This basically just owned Venom Goblin. The problem is, he basically glides around 3 different scheme locations, and you have to... They are all accelerating, so you've got to keep an eye on 3 separate schemes and not have more than 2 of them flip. No, so you're not allowed 2 of them to flip. If 2 out of the 3 flip, you're dead. It's gone. But this guy hits pretty tonk anyway. He's a 2-2 in his first level and then 2-3. But he gets ridiculous. I mean, you've got to keep an eye on 3 schemes. He's steady, so you can't stun or confuse him easily. If you get him to level 2, he gets steady, toughness, and you have 2 face-down encounter cards dealt to you. Every player. Ow! It's a bit harsh. And then some of these cards, some of them aren't too bad. You know, a minion here and there, and some, like, you know, things about spreading threat where his glider is. But then he also has cards like We Are One, that is a free resource discard card, and +3/+3. I'm sorry, you can turn this guy into a 5/5 in his base form unless you spend your entire turn getting rid of the card. Bit powerful much? And then you've got some minions, okay, a guard minion here, a guard minion here. And then you get Symbiote Elite, or whatever he is. Where is he? Symbiotic Monstrosity. 6 hit points, potentially 9. 2/2, Retaliate 1, Steady and Toughness. And he's got 4 boost icons on him. But to come across this thing as a minion, this guy's pretty much an overpowered hero by himself. If this guy comes out, you're really screwed having to take ages to deal with this guy. And I find this one a little bit swingy. It's like, if his really stupidly powerful cards don't come out, you have a good chance of taking them down as long as you can mitigate the threat on the other locations. And especially if you can defend against his attacks, which have a lot of boost icons around the place. So Venom Goblin can swing from being relatively straightforward to being impossibly hard. Now granted, some of the other ones like Thanos and Loki from 2 of the other expansions are just stupidly hard, period, regardless. So I will take this Venom Goblin over those ones at the current state. But yeah, he's no slouch. And nor's Venom. Anything with those two is going to be pretty hard. You should be able to deal with Sandman and Mysterio fine, and you'll have a sort of middle-of-the-road battle with Sinister Six. But honestly, yeah, compared to a lot of the other big boxes, where some of the scenarios are a little bit too difficult for their own good, this one felt pretty balanced for the most part, with maybe a couple of exceptions. But like I say, I don't consider myself to be a Marvel Champions expert, it's just that's kind of my experience. So yeah, all in all, this is definitely a pretty solid big box expansion. I prefer it to Rise of Red Skull. Guardians Most Wanted, yeah, I prefer it to Guardians Most Wanted, Galaxy Most Wanted, because the villains in that were just stupidly hard, but they had some cool heroes and cards in there. Mad Titan Shadow is kind of a mix. I mean, yeah, this is probably one of my favourites of the lot. But then that's because I'm a Spider-Man fan. You know, if you're a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, you probably like Galaxy's Most Wanted, but for me, all of these heroes I recognise, apart from Venom Goblin, but it's Green Goblin with Venom symbiote. I know how that works. But Mysterio I love, you know, the Sinister Six I love, Venom I love, you know, Sandman I can take or leave. But I like Spider-Man. And now you've got the normal Spider-Man, Peter Parker, you've got Miles Morales, you've got Ghost Spider, and wasn't there another Spider-Man character that came out? I can't remember. Oh yeah, Spider-Woman. You could have a 4-player game of this and everybody take a Spider-Man character. That'd be pretty sweet, wouldn't it? But like I say, I've obviously not tried that, but it's food for thought. So yeah, it's another cool box. I would probably give this one, I'd give this one an 8 out of 10 actually. It's got some cool stuff in it. These 2 heroes are pretty powerful, even though Miles Morales is going to suck a bit against a couple of heroes in here. Ghost Spider is going to be one of the top tier heroes for some time to come. So, you know, keep a lookout for Ghost Spider. She's pretty tonk. But yeah, these are some pretty cool villain battles that I would, you know, the campaign kind of sucks a bit, but I would happily play some of these heroes in standalone form any day. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for me for Sinister Motives Marvel Champions. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple on Beyond the Base Game. If you like what you see, please remember, thumb up the video, consider subscribing, and comment on the video about Marvel Champions. Do you like this set? Which of the big boxes do you like before? Who's your favourite hero? Whatever. Tell me anything Marvel Champion related. Until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including the recent podcast episode I did, where I talk about the Dice Tower Award nominations, or you can check out my top 10 non-essential expansions that I did as a solo live stream just the other week. Take care, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.